Subscribe to our channel and press the bell icon so that you never miss any video lesson from RAU'S IAS Study Circle. Hello and welcome to Daily News Simplified, an answer to what, why and how of newspaper reading from your UPSC perspective. Today let us discuss the important news which has appeared in the New Delhi edition of the Hindu newspaper dated 6th June 2020. The news to be discussed has been displayed on your screen and timestamping for the same has been provided in the description box below. So let's start our today's discussion from your pre as well as mains perspective. Now the first news to be discussed appears on page number 1 and also as a continuation on page number 8. It says that India-China hold talks and agree to resolve their differences peacefully. Foreign ministry level discussions reviewed bilateral ties as well as current developments between the two countries. Now over the past few days we have been discussing various aspects with respect to India-China relationships as well as their growing differences because of the border disputes. So it is in this aspect that the foreign ministries on both sides have agreed to settle their differences so that these differences do not become disputes. Now this is a very important change with respect to India-China relationship, as they have said that they do not want their differences to result into dispute. Further, both the governments have said that both India and China are not a threat to each other, and in this regard there is a need for a peaceful resolution of their differences. Now as a civil services aspirant, you should not see this particular development between India and China through a bilateral prism, as there are certain global issues involved here, especially including the United States of America. So these developments, especially the fact that India and China have agreed to handle their differences through peaceful negotiation, must be seen also from the perspective of India-US relationship as well as China-US relationship, as questions can be asked in the mains examination with all these respects. Further, both India and China have also agreed to respect each other's sensitivities, concerns and aspirations. Now this again is an important development with respect to peaceful negotiation between India and China, as somewhere their sensitivities, concerns and global aspirations merge. So with respect to your mains examination, questions can be asked on common areas of sensitivities, concerns as well as aspirations between India and China. And also the fact that how this getting close of India and China might impact India-US relationship. Although as of now the peace talk has not negotiated, so still there are some time to understand that how this peace negotiation between India and China on border disputes will progress. However, in this respect, it's also important to understand that both India and China have reviewed their state of bilateral relations, including current developments. Now these current developments are not only with respect to India-China border dispute, but also it has certain global aspect. So it is in this regard that this news becomes important from your mains perspective. Now in our last discussion, we have already discussed that India believes in an upcoming Asian century and also believes in the concept of multi-alignment. And it is because of these concepts and belief that India did not accept United States' offer to mediate between India and China on their border disputes. So accordingly, both the countries, that is India and China, have agreed to settle their disputes through peaceful negotiation. Now this can be said to be a concern for the United States concerning their aspirations in the Indo-Pacific region. So considering this global aspect, both India and China has agreed for an upcoming military level talk with each other. And in this regard, there was also a consensus which was reached between both leaders, that is both sides of India and China, for a peaceful, stable and balanced relation. As both India and China believes that this peaceful, stable and balanced relationship will be a positive factor for stability in the current global situation. So finally we see that there is a global perspective with respect to India-China peaceful settlement of disputes. Further, in the global perspective, both sides, that is India and China, have agreed to exchange views as well as cooperate. First, with respect to tackling COVID-19 situation, Second, cooperation in various multilateral forums. And third, both sides have agreed for a planned initiative to mark the 70th anniversary of diplomatic relations between India and China. So all these developments cannot be seen only from the perspective of bilateral relationship between India and China, and there is definitely a global perspective attached to these developments recently. Further, both India and China have agreed to oppose politicizing epidemic situation and support World Health Organization. Now again, this aspect must be understood from these two developments. First is that Dr. Harshvardhan has become the chairman of Executive Board of World Health Organization, and Donald Trump has said that United States will withdraw from World Health Organization. So again, with respect to politicizing epidemic situation and supporting World Health Organization, India and China appears to be on the same page. Further, as per the Chinese document, it said that both sides should resolutely safeguard and promote multilateralism, which is also supported by India, oppose unilateralism, protectionism, as well as hegemonism. Third, jointly safeguarding international fairness and justice, and safeguarding common interest of developing countries. So these are some of the areas in which we can say that there are possibilities of future India-China cooperation. So in this regard, again, India-China bilateral relations becomes very important. So from your mains perspective, the bilateral issue between India and China becomes important, and questions can be framed on issues on which they differ, and also global issues on which both India and China can converge. And also questions may be framed concerning India-China relationship on one hand, as well as relationship with India-US, as well as China-US on the other hand. So overall we can say that questions can be framed on the following aspects. First, with respect to impact of growing India-China closeness on the India-US relationship. Next, questions can be asked on impact of growing closeness between India and United States on Indo-Chinese relationship, and also impact of growing differences between US and China on India's relationship individually with United States as well as with China, and also impact of change of global world order and India's position in such changing global world order. So all these are issues on which questions can be framed in the upcoming examination because of these current developments between India and China, as well as because of growing differences between United States and China. Now certain scholars have already dubbed the growing bitterness between US-China relationship as the next Cold War or Cold War 2.0. And it is because of this that a growing China is much more dangerous for US rather than a growing Russia. So with respect to Cold War 2.0 as dubbed by various scholars, all these issues becomes important, and relationship of India not only with China and US but also with Russia will gain significance in times to come. So these are the aspects on which questions can be framed for your upcoming mains examination. So this topic gets covered under international relations part of GS paper 2, especially with respect to bilateral relationship. So after having this understanding, let us move on to our next topic of discussion. Now the next news to be discussed appears on page number 6 in the article section. It says, a right time to shift pharma gears. As a workable idea, a health impact fund can become an alternative track for pharmaceutical innovators. So overall, this article has mentioned about the health impact fund, and this fund will focus on therapeutic impact of drugs and not on the profitability of the pharmaceutical companies. Now this article has used various terms with respect to the pharmaceutical drugs such as compulsory licensing, evergreening of patent, secondary patent, as well as the importance of patent and its relation with increased price of pharmaceutical drugs in the market. So in this regard, let us first of all understand certain important concepts which are also important from the perspective of GS paper 3 in our mains examination, especially with respect to issues relating to intellectual property rights, and also under GS paper 2, especially with respect to issues relating to development and management of social sector including health. So in this aspect, this topic becomes very important and questions can be framed in your mains examination. So first of all, let us go through the basics involved in this particular article. Then we shall discuss the suggestions which have been provided by the authors, and then we shall try to understand that how questions can be framed in the mains examination. Now we all know that any medicine which we take is to cure a particular disease, and every medicine has certain chemical composition. Now these chemical composition of these medicines are protected through patent, and in India this patent protection is provided under the Patents Act of 1970. Now any patent protection to a pharmaceutical drug gives them 20 years of protection, or we can say that it gives them 20 years of exclusive ownership with respect to manufacture, sale as well as distribution of the drugs. So this exclusive ownership disallows any other company to manufacture, sell or distribute the said patented pharmaceutical drug. And this exclusivity increases demand in the market, thereby increasing price of the said drugs. Now let us understand this through this particular example. Suppose company ABC has received a patent on its medicine XYZ which treats AIDS disease. So only company ABC can manufacture and sell this particular medicine XYZ to treat AIDS. Now all the patients who are suffering from AIDS has to take this particular medicine as it treats this particular disease. So this increased demand in the market of this drug will lead to its increase in its prices. And this also gives liberty to this company ABC in this example to increase the price as much as it wants. So the problem here is that those people who cannot afford this medicine because of its increased price cannot take this medicine and cannot get cure from the particular disease. So because of this situation, the Patents Act 1970 of India also provides for an example of compulsory licensing. So in this regard, affordability of the patented drug or patented medicine becomes very significant, especially with respect to life-saving drugs and also for such poor people of a country who cannot afford such medicine having such high prices. So to overcome this situation, the Patents Act 1970 of India provides for the concept of compulsory licensing under section 84 of the Patents Act. So let us understand that when can compulsory licensing be granted for a particular drug. Section 84 of Patent Acts highlights that at any time after the expiration of 3 years from the date of grant of a patent, any person interested may make an application to the comptroller for grant of compulsory license on a patent on any of the following grounds. So these are the grounds on which application can be made for compulsory licensing of a drug. These grounds are: first, that the reasonable requirements of the public with respect to the patented invention have not been satisfied. Second, that the patented invention is not available to the public at large at a reasonably affordable price. And third, that the patented invention is not worked in the territory of India. So these are the grounds on which application can be made with respect to compulsory licensing of a pharmaceutical drug. Now here is another aspect of evergreening of patent. Now as we have seen that any patent gives a protection of 20 years. So what happens after 20 years? So the companies think that after 20 years their profit margin will decrease substantially. So in order to extend the protection granted through patents, these companies go for a secondary patent of the same drug. So under secondary patent, they change certain chemical composition of the medicine and present them as a new medicine. So continuation of patent protection through secondary patents on a particular drug is also termed as evergreening of patent. Now the Patents Act 1970 of India provides for certain strict conditions to grant secondary patent. So let us go through those conditions as provided under the Patents Act. The Act says that to get secondary patent in India, medicine must show the following. First, technical advance in the product. Second, such technical advance should not be obvious to a common person. Third, it should not be mere variant of the known substance. And fourth, in case of combination of product, it is allowed only if it shows synergistic effect different from the original product. So one of the important conditions to grant secondary patent in India is that the impact of the new medicine must be different from the original one, and the new medicine should not be just a mere variant of the known substances. So these are the conditions to provide secondary patent in India. So it is because of this, evergreening of pharmaceutical drugs in India is comparatively difficult as compared to other countries including United States. Now another important aspect is that even TRIPS allows for compulsory licensing. It says that TRIPS also allows for compulsory licensing of drugs to produce generic version of life-saving drugs required to meet public health challenges. So in this regard, compulsory licensing effectively allows countries to overcome the restriction imposed by patent, and this overall allows them to make the drugs available at a lower price. Now another important aspect is that Doha Declaration outlines the right of national governments to compulsorily license patents and freedom to determine the grounds upon which such licenses are granted. So these can be said to be some of the important aspects with respect to compulsory licensing. And this aspect of compulsory licensing as well as evergreening of patent becomes an important topic from your pre as well as mains perspective. So it is in all these backdrops, this article highlights about the problems with respect to current research and development ecosystem. The first aspect highlighted is with respect to high price of pharmaceuticals. Now these pharmaceutical companies provides a lot of investment for the research and development for these drugs, and it is because of this they keep the cost high so that they can recover the investment which they have made in the research and development for that particular medicine. So because of this huge investment in research and development by certain pharmaceutical companies, they keep the cost high when patent is granted to such pharmaceutical drugs. So the first problem highlighted here is high price of pharmaceuticals because of patent provided to these drugs. The second problem is that there is lack of research to find cure for tropical diseases and diseases infecting poor people such as dengue, chikungunya, malaria, etc. And because these researches are not that much profitable for these pharmaceutical companies, hence they do not invest much into the research and development to cure such diseases, as it is not profitable for these pharmaceutical companies. So this is the second problem which has been highlighted by the authors in this article. The third aspect is with respect to secondary patent or evergreening of patent. Now the author says that most of the secondary patents which the pharmaceutical companies goes for have very less therapeutic value. And this is done mainly to extend patent protection for another 20 years so that the price of the drugs can be kept high, resulting in maximization of profit without adding much therapeutic value from the products. So it is because of this fear that these pharmaceutical companies go for secondary patent, as it also restricts other companies from producing the same drug. So basically the companies go for secondary patent to maximize their profits. So these are the problems which has been highlighted by the authors in this particular article with respect to the current ecosystem of research and development in the pharmaceutical industry. Moving further, let us go through the steps which have been taken by the Indian government to promote affordable medicines in the country. Now here, three aspects have been highlighted. First is with respect to National List of Essential Medicines. So as per the Drug Price Control Order of 2013, the National Pharmaceutical Pricing Authority has been fixing these ceiling prices for certain essential drugs. These drugs are known as scheduled drugs and are included in the National List of Essential Medicines. So overall the government regulate the prices of those drugs which has been categorized as per the National List of Essential Medicines. The next aspect highlighted is Pradhan Mantri Bharatiya Jan Aushadhi Pariyojana. So under this scheme, the cheaper generic medicines are sold through the network of these Jan Aushadhi Kendras. And the third is with respect to compulsory licensing. Now we have already seen about compulsory licensing and how compulsory licenses allows or authorizes third party apart from the owner of the pharmaceutical drugs to make, use or sell a particular patented drug without the permission of patent owner of such drugs. Now in this regard, it's interesting to note that India has exercised compulsory licensing options in the year 2013, and this was done for Bayer's Nexavar, which was a patented kidney cancer drug. Now, as per the compulsory licensing of Government of India, it authorized another company, Natco Pharma, to manufacture and sell Nexavar in India. And this resulted in the decline in the price of Nexavar. It says that subsequently the price of the drug Nexavar got reduced to 4% of its original value. So suppose if the price of the drug was rupees 100, then after compulsory licensing, the price of the drug came down to rupees 4 only. So these can be said to be some of the steps taken by the Government of India to promote affordable medicines in the country. So, considering the steps taken by the Indian government, the question remains that what should be done at international level to promote affordable medicines for common people. So it is in this regard the authors in this article have put forward a proposal to set up health impact funds. And this health impact fund will address the various problems with research and development ecosystems as discussed earlier. Now, the first and foremost important aspect with respect to health impact fund is that it will focus more on the therapeutic impact of the proposed drug rather than the profitability concerns. So in this regard, it says that the idea behind this fund is to attract research and development investment in development of new medicines which may lead to higher socio-economic benefits for the community at large. The article says that the development of such medicines has not been possible because of the motive of higher financial gains for the pharmaceutical companies. So in this regard, the author says that development of such medicines to treat neglected tropical diseases would benefit around 1 billion population. However, such investment in research and development to treat these tropical diseases might not lead to substantial financial gains for the pharmaceutical company. So this is the challenge with respect to putting investment in such products which might not be financially viable. So in this regard, the question remains about the mode and manner of the funding with respect to health impact funds and the possible benefits for the pharmaceutical companies. So in this regard, let us go through the proposal for health impact funds as suggested by the authors. So the authors highlight that funding can come from various sources such as contributions from the government, international tax on greenhouse gas emission, and speculative financial transactions. So in this regard, the authors want the pharmaceutical companies to invest in R&D and develop new medicines which would have higher socio-economic benefits with respect to the therapeutic value rather than having poor financial gains, as high therapeutic value for these medicines will help in treating billions of people suffering from such diseases. Now, one aspect highlighted is that such medicines would have to be registered with the Health Impact Fund, and once registered, these medicines should be sold without any profit and must be sold at or below the cost of manufacturing. Now, the impact of the medicine, that is the therapeutic impact of the medicine, that is whether the medicine is working or not working on the community, will then be analyzed in terms of health gains on the community. That is whether the community as such who are taking such medicines have gained anything from such medicines. That is whether the community taking such medicines have been cured or not. So one of the examples of having high therapeutic value can be said to the fact that if a new medicine which is introduced leads to substantial decrease in death rates among people, or it may reduce the incidence of a particular disease. So overall, these health gains shall be analyzed and quantified in terms of financial value. And accordingly, the reward payments made to the pharmaceutical companies will be in line with these health gains. So overall, these health impact funds focuses directly on the therapeutic value which these new medicines will provide to the company at large in treating billions of people. So this article becomes very important from the perspective of our mains examinations. So from your mains perspective, questions can be asked on the concept of compulsory licensing as well as evergreening of patents and their impacts. Further, on the problems with respect to current research and development ecosystem, especially for the pharmaceutical industry, and also the steps which must be taken at international level to promote affordable medicines for all the sections of the society, especially the vulnerable sections. And in this aspect, you can give the example of Health Impact Fund and how this Health Impact Fund, which focuses more on the therapeutic aspect of treating a disease, becomes important, and why investment should be made with respect to treating such neglected diseases, including diseases in the tropical region. So these are some of the important aspects on which questions can be framed in your mains examination. So after having this understanding, let us move on to our next news discussion. The next news to be discussed appears on page number 9. It says, ahead of the vote for United Nations Security Council non-permanent member seat, India launches campaign brochure. So this news highlights that India is about to become a non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council. And if elected, India will become a non-permanent member of UNSC for a period of 2 years. Further, it says that 2/3 of the UN members needs to vote for India if India is to become a non-permanent member of the United Nations Security Council. Further, it also says that India is the sole contestant from Asia Pacific region. So far, India does not have any rival contender, and hence in this regard, it is considered that there will be hardly any problems with respect to India being elected as the non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council. So in this regard, the Ministry of External Affairs has launched the campaign brochure. So in this regard, let us go through some of the important highlights of campaign brochure. So according to the Ministry of External Affairs, India as of now is facing 4 very different challenges to international peace and security. Now please understand one thing here. This again forms another aspect of question making for your mains examination, as question may be asked in 10 marks as to what are the different challenges which India currently faces, especially with respect to international peace and security. So in this regard, here is your ready-made answer with respect to these 4 aspects at least. First, it says that the normal process of international governance has been under increasing strain as frictions have increased. Now please understand this term of international governance here. Now here, India is trying to indirectly tell the United Nations and its 5 permanent members that there have been international frictions as well as changes in the overall global world order. So here again, India is also eyeing in future the permanent seat of the United Nations Security Council. So it is in this regard the Ministry of External Affairs highlights that India is facing 4 very different challenges to international peace and security, and the first aspect is that the normal peace of international governance as has been under increasing strain as frictions have increased. Second, traditional and non-traditional security challenges continue to grow unchecked. Now it's important to understand that here again India has targeted the United Nations Security Council as it is the duty of UNSC to maintain international peace and security as per the UN Charter. So here again, India is just trying to highlight the fact that there are changes in the global world order and according changes needs to be made in future in the United Nations Security Council as well. It further highlights that terrorism is the most egregious of such examples. Third, it says that global institutions remain unreformed and underrepresentative. Hence, they are therefore less able to deliver their requisite performance. And lastly, the COVID-19 pandemic and its grave economic repercussions will test the world like never before. So these are the 4 different challenges to international peace and security as faced by India. So it is in these aspects that India has released a brief document which reflect Prime Minister's 5S approach to the world. And these 5S approach includes Samman, that is respect, Samvad, that is dialogue, Sahyog, that is cooperation, fourth, Shanti, that is peace, to create conditions for universal Samriddhi, that is prosperity. So, through this 5S approach, India seeks to move towards a new orientation for a reformed multilateral system, also known as norms. Now coming back to the first article itself, we have already discussed that India believes in the concept of multi-alignment, and hence in this regard, a new approach towards reformed multilateral system becomes very important with respect to India's foreign policy. So with respect to India's foreign policy in the changing world order system, new orientation for a reformed multilateral system becomes extremely important for us to understand from our mains perspective. So for your prelims examination, you must know about this 5S approach, and you can use this 5S approach if a question is asked in your mains examination, highlighting important features of India's foreign policy. Now further, the Ministry of External Affairs has also released a brochure which highlights the priorities India has set for itself. These priorities are First, seeking responsible and inclusive solutions. Second, concrete and result-oriented actions at Security Council for an effective response to international terrorism. So India is giving a lot of focus to international terrorism. So in this regard, this topic or this issue of international terrorism becomes important, and question in your mains examination can be asked on an effective world response to growing challenges to international terrorism, as well as how can India contribute to reduce the impact of terrorism from the world. Next, it highlights about reformed multilateralism to reflect contemporary realities. Now here, this contemporary reality becomes very significant because this contemporary reality is with respect to changing world order. Further, a comprehensive approach to peace and security guided by dialogue, mutual respect, commitment to international law, for which India also hopes to help streamline United Nations peacekeeping. And lastly, technology with a human touch. So these are the broad parameters highlighted in the brochure released by MEA, highlighting the priorities of India which it has set for itself with respect to maintaining international relations. Now the brochure further highlights that as a rule-abiding democracy and a positive contributor to the security of global commons, India will work constructively with partners to overcome old and new fault lines and offer innovative and inclusive solutions. So again, this becomes very important to understand, that is to overcome old as well as new fault lines. So India is looking forward to a constructive dialogue with all its partners for an innovative and inclusive solution. Further, India wants to help the developing countries so that they can recover from the impact of COVID-19 pandemic. Further, India also wants to focus more on various aspects of development and support greater involvement of women and youth in shaping a new paradigm. So, role of women as well as youth becomes important here. And lastly, enhance transparency, credibility, representation, and finally effectiveness of the United Nations Security Council, thereby promoting its institutional reform. So ultimately, the brochure released by Ministry of External Affairs does mention about the term institutional reform of United Nations Security Council. Now here again, all these aspects highlighted through the Ministry of External Affairs becomes a possible answer if a question in this regard is asked by UPSC. So this particular aspect mentioned by MEA can become your possible question for mains. Let's see how. So converting this statement in a question format, it becomes: examine the role which India can play as a rule-abiding democracy and a positive contributor to the security of global commons in 150 words. So we see that these aspects highlighted by Ministry of External Affairs in its brochure becomes a potential topic for your upcoming mains examination, as it provides a roadmap with respect to role which India can play as a rule-abiding democracy and as a positive contributor to the security of global commons. Further, as already highlighted, another mains question can be asked on the 5S approach. So we understand that this topic becomes very important from our mains perspective and gets covered under GS paper 2, especially with respect to international relations. Now the last topic for today's discussion appears on page number 15. Now this topic becomes important from your prelims examination point of view. It highlights that RBI creates Rs 500 crore fund to boost payment infrastructure, and this fund is named as Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, that is PIDF, and it has been created by RBI. So this itself becomes an important point to be remembered from your prelims point of view. It further says that these funds will help to improve infrastructure in order to deploy point of sale machines in tier 3 to tier 6 cities as well as in northeastern states. Further, it says that RBI shall initially contribute half of the sum, that is rupees 250 crores, and the remaining half of the contribution shall be made by card issuing banks as well as card networks operating in India. And in this regard, the PIDF, that is the Infrastructure Development Fund, shall be governed through an advisory council which shall be managed and administered by the Reserve Bank of India. Now, after our discussion, let us revise the important aspects important from prelims perspective. So in this regard, this is your summary for prelims for today. Now today we discussed about India-China peaceful negotiation. Further, in this regard, you must know the important location of conflict between India and China and also negotiations between the two countries in the past. Now these aspects have been provided in the PDF, so you can go through the PDF with respect to these two aspects. Next, we discussed about election of India as non-permanent member of United Nations Security Council. In this regard, the Ministry of External Affairs has provided for a brochure in which it talks about the 5S approach, which is India's foreign policy. And this 5S can be said to be Samman, Samvad, Sahyog, Shanti and Samriddhi. Further, this 5S approach will lead to India's norms policy, that is new orientation for a reformed multilateral system. So you must know about 5S approach as well as norms. Further, we discussed about the Health Impact Fund as well as compulsory licensing. In this regard, you should know that TRIPS allows compulsory licensing, and this aspect has been highlighted in the Doha Declaration of World Trade Organization. We also discussed about secondary patent, evergreening of patent, and also need for investment in research and development, especially in the pharmaceutical sector to find cure for tropical diseases. Next, we discussed about Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, which is created by RBI, and in this aspect, RBI will invest rupees 250 crores, which is half the amount, and this is for tier 3 to tier 6 centers of India, including northeastern states. Further, the remaining half of the amount shall be invested by card issuing banks and card network operators. And this PIDF, that is Payment Infrastructure Development Fund, shall be administered and managed by the Reserve Bank of India. So these are some of the important aspects which you must know from your prelims point of view. With this, let's move on to our question for the day. Now, after our discussion, this forms your question for the day for today. The question is, consider the following statements about Payment Infrastructure Development Fund. First, RBI has created the fund to encourage acquirers to deploy point-of-sale infrastructure in tier 3 to tier 6 centers and northeastern states. Second, the Reserve Bank will make the entire contribution of rupees 500 crores to the PIDF. The question is, which of the statements given above about PIDF are correct? Options are A, 1 only, B, 2 only, C, both 1 and 2, and D, neither 1 nor 2. Now coming to the answer of yesterday, the question was, consider the following statements about Global Alliance for Vaccines and Immunization. First, India is the largest manufacturer of GAVI vaccines. Second, UK is the leading donor of the Vaccine Alliance. Question was, which of the statements given above are correct? Here the correct answer is C, that is both 1 and 2. Now with this, we come to an end to today's discussion. Thank you.